Character design. Love it. Everybody loves character design. At least
I've met a lot of people who want to be character designers. I'm not one of those people. I just really like to animate. But I do understand why people love character design as much. Like, it's very rare to find an artist who does not have at least a couple OCs with very convoluted backstories and detailed descriptions. And I'm no different in the sense that I have a lot of OCs, not the fact that I like character design. I've already mentioned that I was going to do my short film about one of my OCs, but now we're going to talk about how that went. I just realized I should probably give her a name. You know, confession, her name is actually Momo. That was the original name. Now I know it might seem strange because that's my name online. And the thing about it is that actually it's not. I called myself Momo the Destroyer because I really like the idea of a very cutesy name in combination with violence. Which, now that I say it out loud, sounds a bit childish, but you know, I'm an animator, I'm allowed to be childish. And I was just a big Avatar fan, and honestly, I'd ripped it off from Avatar. I actually ran into a bit of a problem because originally I wanted to call my film A Letter for Momo, but that's a movie that already exists in Japan, so that was not an option. So I had to sort of make a new name. So I just started calling her Bunny, which is, you know, a name. It's a bit descriptive because she's the bunny. So, you know, it's not confusing.
So as I said last time, she's a combination of a cat and a bunny because obviously I was an 8-year-old obsessed with myths. I grew up being a dino kid. When you're obsessed with dinosaurs when you're 4, you grow up and you become obsessed with Zeus. That's like the natural evolution.
So this was an original design. She was very, very yellow because that was my favorite color at the time. And obviously she's changed. She's a bit unrecognizable. She doesn't look the same anymore. She had a bit of a glow up. She got a skincare routine.
So the first major thing that happened that influenced the design was that I became obsessed with Neopets. Neopets was a thing that existed like 2005 to, I don't know, it's dead now, unfortunately. Does it still exist? No, it's still, that's insane. So she's a survivor. She still exists apparently. But if you're old like me, and you were in the trenches with me in Neopets, you will remember paintbrushes. So for the uninitiated, a paintbrush in Neopets was something that you would use to change the color or appearance of your pet. These were atrociously expensive. They could go for millions of Neo points. But one relatively cheap brush used to be the striped brush, which is a pink and blue brush. I sometimes like to refer to them as cotton candy colors because cotton candy is great. Actually, it's not, but the colors are great. So I went in sneakily and I stole those colors and then I gave them to her because you know, it's just reduce, reuse, recycle. The second thing that was insanely influential with the first redesign I did was that I got into Warrior Cats. If you don't know what Warrior Cats is, first of all, who are you?
Warrior Cats is a book about cats who like to have a lot of fights for some reason. There's a lot of wars in these books, which is strange because they're for kids, but you know.
Some of you might have heard that and thought, oh, that explains everything. That explains so much about you, Annabelle. There was a trend. There was a specific way that these cats would be drawn, and I adopted that way because, you know, and that's why she looks like this, and that's why she has cat emo bangs. That was a thing at the time. You would draw your cats, and you would give them emo bangs.
It might sound strange, but she didn't actually change that much from this point onward. The colors stayed the same, the emo bangs stayed the same. I gave her a little scarf because I thought that oversized scarves were cute. They are, so she's always gonna have that because it's adorable. The only thing that really changed was me, because I became better at drawing. Lots of animation memes led to her just
looking better. You know what one great thing was? I started doing animation memes in 2012, and those cringe animation meme compilations only really became a thing in 2016, which is why I avoided the main bullying era, which is great. Can you imagine blowing up in the wrong way when you were 12? I cannot.
Also, at the same time, there was this sort of trend of making critiques of OCs that didn't make a lot of sense. The general advice used to just be like, oh, don't give them multicolored hair because that's unrealistic. Looking back on it, I feel like this was just because it was mostly children making critiques of work made by other children, and because of that they didn't really know what they were doing. It was just all very unnuanced. Yeah, if you're making an incredibly realistic story about a very gritty detective, you can't really give the main character the rainbow hairs. It's not gonna work well. But were all these people making serious detective stories or the stuff. No, they were making silly stuff that 13-year-olds make. Most people forget that one of the most important things about character design is that your characters have to be stylistically consistent. You can't put someone with Rainbow Card hair into Attack on Titan, but you can put them into Soul Eater, because they're two different series with different, should I say, vibes. No one seems to really talk about stylistic consistency when it comes to character designs, but it's really important. All your characters have to feel like they live in the same universe. Stylistic consistency is also the reason why eventually I ended up cutting off her emo bangs. I still feel like emo bangs are cool, but they simply did not fit the vibe of the story, which is more fairy tale-ish and less emo 2008 cat-ish. Tragic, I know, but sometimes things have to be done.
So with the owl, I was a bit limited in my choices because I really had to design him around the bunny as opposed to designing them in tandem. I got a lot of remarks from my teachers that he should probably have a dark blue suit because that's generally the colors of a postal uniform. But the problem was I wanted him to have a green suit because that would fit better with Bunny next to him. And it kind of just goes back to the way that I choose colors for characters. I really struggled with picking colors when it comes to backgrounds. I do not have that struggle with characters because I just use a really simple method. Not a big fan of those videos that are like 10 amazing art tips that will make your art instantly better, because I feel like it lacks a bit of nuance. Unfortunately, this is one of those tips. I basically just pick 3 colors, any colors, and then those are the colors that my character will be. With human characters, it's usually a color for the hair, a color for the skin, and then some color for the clothes. And when you want to add details, you simply use one of those 3 colors. It reduces decision fatigue and it makes your character look harmonious. For the owl, I picked beige, brown, and green. And then for Bunny, I picked pink, blue, and purple. And I mean I picked it like 10 years ago. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, because in the beginning, I struggled a bit with deciding what kind of owl the owl should be. In the start of the movie, he had to be kind of scary, but then later on, he sort of becomes a dad, and I found it a bit hard to balance those two. Eventually, I just came to the conclusion that him being a dad is more important than him being scary. So I ended up making him an eagle owl, which is a bit of a standard owl in media. Sort of looks like he belongs in a library, sort of looks like he's kind of mad at you. That's an eagle owl. But eagle owls have these sort of feet that I don't like. They're too bony, and I don't want to animate all those details. So I took some creative liberty and I gave him snowy owl feet, because the movie's kind of set in winter for the first 2 minutes, and then it's all summer. I don't know why I stuck to the winter theme that much. I think maybe it's because of the surrounding mountains. I also gave him claws on his wings because I really dislike the trope in animated media when a bird uses its feathers as hands. I really hated that even as a child. So now he's got little claws like a bat. And then my main characters were basically done. Look at them. That went relatively smoothly. I wonder if the rest of production will go this well. But at that point, something happened, because I was hanging out with some friends. I was complaining about my owl, because my owl has wings, and wings are very annoying to animate, because you have to animate feathers, and then I want to put in the follow-through, because I'm insane. And I was complaining about it, and my friend said, well, it was your choice to make him an owl. You could have made him a different animal. And I said, what animal could I have possibly made him? And then she said, you could have made him a wolf. Oh, I'm not too sure. And then I drew him as a wolf. Yeah, that's him. But as a wolf, that's what we could have had. That was an option. But eventually I decided, no, he's an owl, because, you know, you have to know when to quit. There's this notion I've heard sometimes that you can keep improving, like there's no such thing as perfect. And I disagree. It's my one controversial opinion. I believe there is such a thing as perfection. But anyway, you can never be perfect. The problem is that I conceive of perfection differently than the average person. There's this weird idea of perfection as being a sort of sliding scale. You can keep going up on that scale. But I think of perfection as a point on a map. If I were to say, oh, I'm going to Paris, and then I go to Paris, and someone tells me, oh, but you know, you could go too far into Paris. Like, what do you mean? No, you go into Paris, you know, and at a certain point, if you keep walking, you'll have walked out of Paris, and you'll end up somewhere in rural France. Is that where you want to be? No, your goal was Paris. You can make something too clean or too detailed or too whatever, but you can't make it too perfect, because that's not what it means. I used to have a lot of background characters because, you know, I wanted to make the village lively and lived in. But then my teachers were like, please cut out all of those crowd scenes because they're gonna cause you a lot of pain. So now I have these designs, but also
not going to use them because they live in a ghost town. I still want to show them though, because I feel like, so you've got this bear at the start of the film. I had a bunch of comedy scenes with him, but now he has been evicted. There was also this penguin. They had comedic scenes together. Not anymore, because he has also lost his place in this village. The only other character that really played a major role was this Robin, who's like the boss of the owl. He's like the big postal worker person, bird man. But I cut out his major scene because the film was too long. So now he's also a bit useless. I still think he's adorable though. Now that I had to design some of the main characters though, there was only one more thing that I sort of needed to deal with. You see, my first short film had one major problem, and that was that the characters were consistently inconsistent. What I mean is, they were off model all the time. Her face just, like the main character, her face just kept morphing into something unrecognizable. Every scene, it looked like she got a facelift. I didn't really understand how to prevent this at the time, so I really wanted to avoid this in this film. So here are my very professional tips on how to keep characters on model. Tip number 1, draw all the time. You just have to draw all the time, and then making characters more consistent will become easier.
Tip number 2. You might have noticed that despite the fact that this entire video is about character design, not even a single time have I mentioned model sheets. And there's a reason for that. That's because they're useless. However, if you're talking about keeping characters on model, shouldn't you mention model sheets? Like, it's in the name. Model sheet. Okay, calm down. I know that sounds ridiculous, Model sheets, an integral part of any production, but the reason why people make model sheets is partly the same reason that people make storyboards to communicate with the rest of the crew. But again, if your crew is a single person, you don't really need to communicate with anyone. I think this Lilo and Stitch model sheet is really clear. Like, this is a really great example of how you're communicating with the crew. See, they've got like all the do's and don'ts. Do you need do's and don'ts for your own characters? No, because you kind of know those. Model sheets, I think that sometimes, especially with student films, they can do more harm than good. Now hear me out. I remember years ago, I got this tip from Tumblr again, because, I don't know, Tumblr really saved me back in the day. But there was this person, and they said that basically a lot of people, they start off by drawing a model sheet. But the problem is that they've never even animated their character before. They just make the design, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna make a consistent model sheet. And you know what the problem is? You don't know if that's what your character's gonna look like. Yeah, I know that sounds weird, but you have to remember that when you first design a character, you're putting a lot of effort into those first initial drawings. And so the way that you draw them the first time is not going to be the way that you draw them after 100 times. There's so many details and design quirks that get lost during animation because, you're automatically going to find an easier, more conventional way to draw your own character. And so instead of making a model sheet, something that could be way more useful to make sure that your character stays on model is to make a test animation. You could pick a scene or like just a movement, and I'm not just talking about a blinking animation, that doesn't count. I'm talking about full body movement, a character animation, maybe a little lip sync or something like that. Walk cycles are a classic. Just something that requires you to draw the character at least like, I don't know, 20 times at the very least. Not only does it give you a better impression of what your actual character is going to look like, but also it's going to give you an opportunity to run into the roadblocks that you're going to eventually run into when you're doing animation. But you've run into these roadblocks way earlier, so now you can solve them way earlier, and that's great, isn't it? So yeah, the reason why I haven't mentioned model sheets because I don't use them. And if you can pick between doing a test animation and making a model sheet, I would highly suggest just doing a test animation instead.
My third tip, and this is the one that helped me the most, is make your characters out of clay. When I was younger, one time I saw a video about how Timon and Pumbaa were like sculpted out of clay, and the animators at Disney used them for reference when they were animating on The Lion King. And at first I thought, oh, that's way too much effort. I'm not gonna make my characters out of clay, and then I did. So here they are. Look very cute. I used to think that you just had to sort of power through and make everything on model without using any help. I thought that when you were a good artist, everything should just be on model automatically. And I guess it makes sense that when you design a character, that would mean that they would be on model, because I designed them. But that's not the case. You have to put a lot of effort into keeping your characters on model, especially if that's something that you struggle with, and I struggle with it. So I've got like a lot of clay footage. I thought I would explain more about how I made it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. I grabbed some clay, it's polymer clay by the way, and then I made them. But I've got all this footage, so enjoy this time-lapse.